listener production.
Hey, Chris Spear with you. Welcome to The Briefing. We've been talking about it for a while, but the way you watch porn is about to change. And while advocates know the reforms aren't perfect, they do say it's a step in the right direction.
There was always something hidden and secretive about the whole experience. But it wasn't until much later on, until I ended up in rehab at 30 years old, where I was confronted with the possibility that maybe there was something that was holding me more than I would have liked to.
That chat with a former porn addict is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Sasha Barbacat on Tuesday the 24th of Feb.
Hey Chris, the Prime Minister has written to his British counterpart to give his support in removing Andrew Mountbatten Windsor from the line of succession. It might sound like a strange move, but it is actually a necessity if the UK wants to take away the former Prince's right to rule. Let me explain. Complex legal framework governs the line of succession, and Mountbatten Windsor currently remains 8th in line to the throne even after his titles were stripped by the King last year over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. And the laws state that if someone were to be removed from the royal succession line, all the heads of countries with King Charles as head of state must agree before the ruling can be passed.
Yeah, so Anthony Albanese has become the first in the Commonwealth to give his support, writing a letter to British PM Sir Keir Starmer confirming his government will support the move, calling the allegations against the disgraced royal grave. This all comes after Mountbatten Windsor's unprecedented arrest last week and as multiple police investigations look into accusations against him, including trafficking women in the UK. And just briefly, in some related news, something breaking as we record, former British Minister and Ambassador to the US, Peter Mandelson, he's been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office over his links to Epstein. Police are investigating whether he passed Epstein sensitive financial information he could have only known because he was in government.
Yeah, it's interesting to see yet another high-profile arrest in the UK while in response to the release of this latest tranche of Epstein files, while in the US nothing has happened. It just goes to show that there is information in there that can lead to at least high-profile people being investigated at the very least. And whether that's happening in the US and we're not aware of it, maybe. But I think it's clear to see that things can come from this, and the UK is proving that, you know, it's going to take that action in response to the Epstein files.
And look, while we are talking about Epstein, we've actually got our in-house investigative journalist, Joey Watson, with us in studio.
Hey guys, good to be back with you.
Hey Joey, on this week's episode of Secrets We Keep Uncovered, you're in here to tell us about it because you sat down with Emily Maitlis. We did have her on the weekend briefing. And of course, it's the journo behind then Prince Andrew's most infamous interview. I'm curious to know what your chat tells us. Like, what more do we get out of Emily Maitlis?
Yeah, it's amazing. Some of the things that she did, the highlighting techniques, she got drilled by her executive producer before the interview, asking 10 different kinds of questions, preparing for 10 different kinds of answers. And it's definitely, was shown in the product that came from it.
Yeah, I personally found it fascinating chatting to Emily, and I know that you got to some places that I didn't quite get the time to get to. So definitely go check that out. It is in your feed now, Secrets We Keep Uncovered.
A link to that will be in our show notes. Anthony Albanese has labelled a coalition bill that would make it illegal to help people return to Australia from terror hotspots as unserious. The comments come after the new Liberal leader Angus Taylor was out and about yesterday promoting plans that would see individuals or groups prosecuted if they assisted the 11 so-called ISIS brides and their 23 children in returning from the Al-Roj camp in Syria to Australia.
We need to shut the door to people who are going to bring hate and violence to our shores from another part of the world.
And it's not just limited to efforts in Syria. The bill also making it a criminal offence to help individuals who have travelled to and have links to designated terrorist hotspots or organisations.
A 10-year imprisonment for doing so is the kind of message we need to be putting in place.
That was Shadow Home Affairs Minister John O'Duniam there.
Yeah, and while Labor has the numbers in Parliament to block the bill, at the heart of the coalition's message is a call for transparency and for the PM to take action that matches his tough rhetoric. They say he is not doing enough when it comes to these so-called ISIS brides. Meantime, yesterday we also heard from the New South Wales Premier, who said his government had been working with the federal government since last year on the group's return and that he expects up to a third of them to settle in New South Wales.
We would make sure that they were safe and we would make sure that they were within
an organisation or a group or an education or a school that had Australian values.
Yeah, and it was interesting hearing him talk as well, because he kind of towed the same line as Albo. He said that he didn't really have sympathy for the mothers, but he does have sympathy for the children. And, you know, we have heard a bunch of humanitarian organisations come out and say, you know, it's time to cool the political rhetoric, like, let's stop politicising this thing. At the end of the day, there are some innocent children part of this cohort, and the Australian government does have a legal responsibility to bring them home and to deal with them in our, whether it's our criminal justice system, whether it's our education system, we do have that responsibility.
Australians across the country have long been promised high-speed trains, whether it's linking Brisbane to Melbourne or Sydney to the Gold Coast. But a new funding announcement from the federal government looks set to cement plans for the first Australian bullet train. The Transport and Infrastructure Minister will today unveil a $230 million commitment to fund further planning for a high-speed rail line linking Sydney to Newcastle. Note planning, Chris.
Yes.
We'll explain later.
Planning is the key word there. The line would eventually connect the entire East Coast from Brisbane all the way down to Melbourne, taking in Canberra and other regional cities like Port Macquarie and Shepparton. But as always with bullet train plans in Australia, the big hurdle remains the total cost and how to fund it, along with securing the land and agreements with local and state governments, hence this announcement of more cash for planning, but no actual start date. So while it's exciting to think about getting from Victoria to Queensland in as little as 6 hours, we shouldn't hold our breath.
No, and I remind people that the very first mention from a government perspective of high-speed rail came all the way back in 1984. And Bob Hawke ordered a study into very fast rail. The proposal did get somewhere in the 90s under Paul Keating, but it was ultimately abandoned in 91 due to financial and regulatory hurdles. Now, in terms of how much this current project would cost, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, like just an insane amount of money. And yeah, purchasing the land that comes with it and getting the approvals and all of that, it is just wild. Anthony Albanese foreshadowed this announcement last week, but he said while, you know, kind of talking about it, oh yeah, I hope to maybe see high-speed rail in my lifetime. Albo's got another 40 or 50 years, I reckon, in him, so we're going to be waiting a while, guys.
It's official. Australia is getting a Trump Tower. The Trump organisation has announced it will be constructing the building at Surfers Paradise, with plans for it to be the tallest building in the country. It'll include a 6-star resort. I didn't even know they went up to 6 stars. 270 apartments and high-end retail space, and is set to soar to 340 metres high, 15 metres taller than our current record holder, Australia's 108 in Melbourne.
And controversially, the Australian developer who is taking credit with making this all happen, he wants to buy up a slice of iconic Surfers Paradise sand in order to build an exclusive beach club in front of the hotel, the Hora. Australia is very well known for having public beaches. We don't have private beaches like in the clubs of Europe, Chris.
Sorry, let me clarify my gasp there. My gasp there wasn't horror. My gasp was, oh, how exciting.
It is a proposal, having private beach clubs anywhere in Australia, but also Surfers Paradise. It's just never sits well with anybody except for Europhiles like yourself.
Thank you.
Work on the project is apparently going to cost $1.5 billion. And it will reportedly start this year, but it's worth noting a formal DA is yet to be lodged with Gold Coast Council. And wrapping up today with a development in the heartbreaking story of Punch the Monkey. Now, I'm going to try not to cry while I read this because I can't handle this story. Now, a quick explainer if you haven't heard it. A baby macaque at a zoo in Japan has gone viral this past week after footage emerged of him clutching a soft toy of an orangutan after he was abandoned by his mother and attacked by the other monkeys in his enclosure.
Now, listeners, you can't see Sasha Papagat's face, but she's actually physically very upset by this story.
I'm not crying, but I'm close.
She's so close to tears, it's wild. Now, look, while he's struggling to make friends with his own kind, Punch has won over the hearts of millions of people who have shown their support by flocking to visit him at Ichikawa City Zoo, but also buying up his emotional support toy. IKEA has confirmed the Jungelslog?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say. Jungelskog.
Jungelskog. The orangutan stuffed animal that Punch has been snuggling has been sold out in the US, Japan and South Korea, with work underway to get it restocked ASAP.
God. I've seen this toy. Actually, I nearly bought it for my son the other week when I was in IKEA. I wish I had. This story is just, it really brings me to tears. And it's worth noting, because some of the footage is quite brutal of Punch being attacked by the other monkeys. But the zoo says that the altercations we're seeing with Punch and the other monkeys are normal because he's learning to socialize without the help of his mother. Yeah. So he'll actually go to that stuffy for emotional support after being picked on, and then he'll go back and he'll try and socialize again. But oh my gosh.
I just think it's so beautiful. The things that pull at your heartstrings now. Motherhood's changing. I keep saying this, but it really has, because a year and a half ago, let me tell you, there would have been no tears on this woman's face.
Oh, that is it for the headlines today. Thank you so much for joining us. Next up, we're getting into Helen Smith's deep dive, and she's chatted with a porn addict to see what he thinks about new legislation that is going to change the way that we watch porn. That chat is coming up next.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here. Jason Blyth was addicted to porn at just 10 years old. He says it shaped the way he approached sex, relationships, and intimacy, and that porn has become so normalised that many young people don't understand the problems that porn addictions can cause. 7 years ago, he was able to break his addiction, and now he's an advocate for addiction prevention. And next month, porn websites in Australia will be required to verify that users are over 18 as part of new rules aimed at reducing children's access to explicit sexual material, self-harm content, and extreme violence online. But will it work, and whose responsibility should it fall under? The platforms, parents, schools, or our government? Jason joins me now. Jason, you were first exposed to pornography at 10 years old. What do you remember about that moment, and how quickly did it become something habitual for you?
Yeah, so I was on a family holiday overseas, and I met another young boy around my age, and we were searching on the family computer, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he just types into the Google search or whatever it was, the search engine at the time, just big boobs. And all of a sudden, clicking on the image link, there was this whole new world that opened up to me in an instant. It was readily available, what felt like secret, private visuals and images, and just a whole nother world that was right at my fingertips. And going back home, I couldn't wait for the first moment that I was going to be at home alone in the house. And I just started spending hours and hours trawling through every porn site I could find, clicking link after link, whatever kind of caught my eye. And as soon as I got home from that holiday, every moment that I could, I would be on porn sites, just feasting my eyes on whatever I could get in.
And how old were you when you had any understanding of what you were consuming and the impact that it might have?
It wasn't until much later, really, about exactly the impact and what I was consuming. I knew that it was obviously something that was secretive and should be hidden. I would always close the windows and make sure that there was no one going to be around. I was very conscious of not getting caught, so there was always something hidden and secretive about the whole experience. But it wasn't until much later on, until I ended up in rehab at 30 years old, where I was confronted with the possibility that maybe there was something that was holding me more than I would have liked to, and that was impacting the way that I lived my life and the cultures that I went into and the types of behaviours that were associated with those cultures, like drug taking and drinking and just dangerous, reckless behaviour. So yeah, it wasn't a very conscious thing, but you don't know what you don't know. And I grew up in a world where being exposed to hardcore pornography from a really young age and being hypersexualized and initiated into this world, it was normal.
So when did you first realise that your relationship with pornography had become an addiction?
It wasn't until after around 30 years old when, as I said, I went to rehab and I was confronted with looking at these things that controlled me more than I controlled them. And it was at this phase of my life where I started taking an inventory of literally everything I smoked. I just had habitual and addictive habits, like even just cracking my knuckles or biting my nails. And these were things that I really had to look at. Even coffee drinking, I could drink up to 7 or 8 coffees a day. And I realized it wasn't kind of normal and that I was dependent on these things. And porn was one of those. It got to the stage where I was looking at porn and masturbating over 5 times a day. And it was a release to be able to go to sleep. It would be a stress relief. And even just wasn't feeling good. And it was just something that became total habit, just part of my regular routine all throughout the day.
You mentioned this just before about porn normalising behaviours. What are some examples of things that porn can normalise, especially for young people, and they won't even realise it?
There's some pretty shocking statistics around young women and men at university that have been interviewed and surveyed, and 50% of women confess and admit to being choked, and 50% of young men are also choking people. There's a lot of crazy statistics around what porn looks like, but for me, what was really concerning much later on is where I started with the search of big boobs to where I ended up many, many years down the track. I needed far more intense type of illicit sexual behaviour to get me off and get me to the point of climax. And it got to the point where it wasn't just an online world anymore. It transitioned to then looking for how I could fulfill those desires and needs in the real world.
So how did you break that cycle and break your addiction to porn? Was it that time you mentioned there, going to rehab and noticing those behaviours?
Yeah, so for me, it was that I'd realised that I'd lost control to a lot of different areas of my life. And one by one, it became a process of taking control of my life again. With each of those things, when I analysed and spent a lot of time in self-reflection, I thought about whether there were behaviours that were healthy or not, and how I could either learn to control them to a healthy level, or if I couldn't, they had to be eradicated altogether. And porn was just one of those that definitely had to go because it had impacted my mind. It's still definitively impacted me. It's like I've been poisoned and corrupted, like a corrupted computer file that just can't necessarily be that easily undone.
Now, the New South Wales government has recently responded to the inquiry into the impacts of harmful pornography on mental, emotional and physical health. This was released late last year, and they said that it's already doing what it can. From your perspective, are they doing enough?
To be honest, I think that one of the things that we could be doing a lot better individually in our own families and our own homes is parents taking a greater responsibility around having these difficult and uncomfortable conversations. I'm concerned that it feels like we've outsourced our parenting to schools and expecting schools to do sexual education. And a lot of parents don't feel comfortable or able to have these kinds of honest conversations with their children. So I think if we individually were teaching our children the standard of what we considered to be appropriate for sex within our family, rather than outsourcing that learning to someone else, that would be a massive step. And I think as well, there could be more money and more education put into schools as well, educating the parents about the risk that's going on, because I do think a lot of the time parents are so out of touch that they're not really able to work in tandem with schools, and they should be. I think those are a couple of things that could easily be done that wouldn't probably require a huge amount of budget or governmental oversight into those projects, but could go a long way to changing the way our children are viewing and being exposed to online pornography.
You mentioned some of that responsibility, but where should it sit with the platforms, parents, schools, or the government?
Gosh, at the end of the day, I think it really has to sit with the parents first. The parents are the ones that have the responsibility to be monitoring and raising their children. They're in their home. That's where it starts. Like that's the root. That's the soil and the foundation for where everything goes. But of course, everything has to be working in harmony and taking these steps that, with the different education environments and the government, the regulations they're trying to bring in. And it's obviously not a bad thing.
Now, we've also recently seen a crackdown for some of the platforms where porn websites and age verification are starting to come into play. So the sites will be required to check that users are over 18 years old, and these will be coming into place next month in March. Do you think a move like this could work?
Yeah, it obviously has potential to work. I think it's much like the social media thing for young people as well. But there's always ways around it, of course. I mean, it's a necessary step, and it should have been done a long, long time ago when I was a kid. It's a good move. We'll find out if it works.
And what would you say to anyone who might be living or struggling with a porn addiction right now?
There's a way out of it, but it comes down to self-determination and having those hard conversations to look introspectively about the way that it controls our life. everything can be undone. But in rehab, one of the terms that's commonly thrown around is people, places, and things. And we have to take inventory about the people that are around us that inspire us or push us and egg us on to continue these behaviours. It's the same with going to certain places or certain things that are in our life which trigger us. And if we want to change them, help's out there. There's conversations that are thankfully happening more and more these days and support. But it's a hard battle because even porn addiction isn't even recognised as a valid addiction. So I think until that happens, people are going to be struggling on their own a lot more to be able to get the support they need. But to those individuals out there, I feel you, it's doable. And you have the power, of course, to take back the pen of your life and write the story that you like. And we have to save ourselves, man. So I encourage you, and it can be done.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks for having me.
That was Jason Blyth, keynote speaker and youth advocate for addiction prevention there. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. Before you go, though, if you could share this ep with someone else who you think might want to hear it, it's a really great way you can support us and all we do here on The Briefing. And you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.